Welcome to the program today. I'm Layo Olarinde. We begin in West Africa, where Guinea's military junta has dissolved the government, ordering security agencies to seal all the country's borders until government ministers have fully handed over to the military. The presidency's Secretary General, Brigadier General Amara Kamara, made the announcement through a presidential decree on state TV, adding that the junta has frozen ministers' bank accounts and ordered them to surrender their passports and official vehicles. However, Mr. Kamara did not disclose the reason for the dissolution or say when a new government will be put in place. The junta seized power in a coup in 2021 September. Colonel Doumbouya led Guinea's armed forces to overthrow elected President Alpha Condé after a series of protests over Mr. Condé's controversial bid for a third term. Guinea is expected to hold elections to return to democratic rule in 10 months, and that's when the 24-month transition period set by the junta and ECOWAS expires. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, UN peacekeepers are deeply concerned by the renewed escalation of hostilities in the eastern region. This is according to UN spokesperson Stephen Dujarric, who was addressing reporters in New York at the UN headquarters. The UN mission in the country, MINUSCO, says it continues to support the Congolese army by defending major routes leading to the key towns of Sake and Goma in North Kivu province.
By defending major routes leading to key towns of Sake and Goma in North Kivu province. Due to the deteriorating security situation around Sake and Goma, the mission is reinforcing its presence there by bringing in peacekeepers from its Force Intervention Brigade that's based in Beni in the northern part of the province. The mission also met with the coordinator of the Armed Forces of the Democratic Republic of the Congo in North Kivu. That took place over the weekend, and that was to coordinate joint military action in the defense of both Sake and Goma. It's also expressed concern over recent disinformation campaigns targeting peacekeepers, which is hampering the peacekeepers' ability to implement their mandate. Peacekeepers are continuing to facilitate safe passage of civilians fleeing the fighting to more secure areas, including around the Kichanga base, where some 25,000 men, women, and children have sought shelter with the UN.
The United States has accused Rwanda of backing the M23 rebel group in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. While the U.S. State Department condemned the worsening violence and called on M23 to cease hostilities immediately and to withdraw from current positions around Sake and Goma. It also called on Rwanda to immediately withdraw all its military personnel from the DRC and remove its surface-to-air missile systems. However, these comments have provoked a backlash from Kigali, with the Foreign Affairs Ministry saying that the U.S. statement distorts the reality and that Rwanda reserves the right to self-defense against the DRC's actions in the area, which it claims to threaten Rwanda's security. All this is coming amidst an escalation of violence in the eastern DRC. In recent weeks, we've seen clashes between the M23 rebels, army forces, and self-defense groups that support them. Hundreds of thousands of people have been forced to flee as a result of the violence. Many of them are now in the main city, Goma, even as M23 rebels advance on the city. Meanwhile, authorities in Rwanda have rejected the U.S. call for the withdrawal of troops and missile systems from eastern Congo. They're saying that they're defending Rwandan territory, even as Congo carries out what it calls a dramatic military build-up near the border. Rwanda's foreign ministry in the statement spoke of threats to Rwanda's national security stemming from the presence in Congo of an armed group whose members include alleged perpetrators of the 1994 genocide. Well, this statement says that the rebel group, known by its initials FDLR, is fully integrated into the Congolese army. Although Rwanda has long cited a threat posed by this FLDR, authorities there had never admitted to a military presence in the eastern Congo, whose authorities accuse the tiny Central African nation of actively supporting the M23 rebels. for joining us now on the program to unpack the security situation in the east of DRC. We have defense and security analyst David Otto joining us now from Abuja. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you very much, Layo, for having me. Thank you.
Well, as a security expert, help us understand, what are we seeing playing out here in the DRC? What do you make of the violence in the eastern region?
Well, Layo, this has been a historical area where conflict has ravaged, especially the eastern part of Congo, the Ituri province. You've got also the Goma and the northern part of Kivu. Where rebel groups, including the likes of, M23, the likes of the FLRDR, but also groups like Codeco, the Corporation for the Development of the Congo, they've often operated, either attacking each other along tribal lines. For example, the Codeco supporting the Lendu tribe against the Hema tribe. But also, from a regional point of view, we've had, countries like Rwanda being accused by DRC of lending military support to the M23 rebels, one of about 120 rebel groups that operate within that region. Very rich, these areas, and, hence explains why there has been constant conflict. But Rwanda has often denied that it is directly supporting M23, even though the UN, the US, the EU has found evidence of that direct support, and they've called upon Rwanda to cease supporting this group. So this area is ravaged by some kind of conflicts. Last week, I think a couple of days back, we saw clashes between tribes. People being killed. So DRC Congo has often, especially in its northern part, been very chaotic, and the UN has been accused of being very unable to deal with, restoring peace and security within this region. So there we have it. Internal and external conflicts are still ongoing.
Indeed, David, and you've already mentioned, the U.S., it's the latest accusation coming from U.S. of Rwanda, backing the M23 rebels, but Rwanda has constantly denied this. What do you think would be Rwanda's gain?
Well, first of all, Rwanda is a sovereign state. They would want to defend themselves against such accusations, because it's a reputational damage. If a country is seen to support a rebel group against another country, that could also be a declaration of war. So Rwanda would, do everything possible to deny these allegations, even though countries like the United States, the UN, and the EU, have directly found evidence of Rwanda's direct support. So for Rwanda, their gain is to deny these accusations. Their gain is to, if at all, maintain the relationship that they have with M23, perhaps to destabilize the region, and that gives them access to raw materials that come from that area. That would be their gain. But this is not the first country that the DRC Congo has accused of plundering. They've accused Uganda, they've accused neighboring states. Last time, they even had to ask countries like Kenya to vacate their peacekeeping mission because they thought they were being compromised. So it's a chaotic, situation in that area.
Now, we've seen protests in the last few days, citizens, accusing the West and international community of silence over what is happening in the DRC. What role are they expecting, them to play? That the local troops, because we know the Southern African Development Community mission, that's the SAMI DRC, it has the SADC has a mission in the DRC with South African troops and, other countries having their troops on ground helping to fight these rebels. So what exactly are these people, looking for to, what are they expecting the international community to, what role are they expecting them to play that SADC isn't already doing?
Well, I think for the past 2 decades, Layo, we've had peacekeeping missions being flown into the northern part of DRC. We still haven't seen any solutions. The UN has been accused of, being very unable to deal with the situation. I doubt if SADC is going to make any difference. Of course, we had, Kenya, of course, deploying its forces there, joint forces. That did not produce any results. I think, the solution is local. In my opinion, DRC has to, wear its seatbelts on and, find a local strategy to deal with these issues. But of course, there is a big role that the international community can play, especially with the accusations that Rwanda is sponsoring M23, of which Rwanda denies. So you need to have the international community present in that situation. They need to speak to the neighbors of DRC Congo. Congo has often accused its neighbors of plundering its resources, including countries like Uganda. So it's not the first time. But from a local point of view, I think the Congolese need to find a solution to this problem. But of course, they need help because as long as you have countries like Rwanda being accused of supporting M23, then of course it's not just an internal matter. It is a matter of regional collaboration and coordination. But to be honest with you, I think this is where the African Union plays a very critical role. They've just had the 37th summit being held in Ethiopia. I would expect to see some solutions being put on the table on how to deal with the DRC. I mean, DRC is so important for the continent, and it cannot be left in chaos as it is.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Defense and Security Analyst David Otto. Thank you for your insights.
Thank you.
Moving on to other stories now. The United Nations World Food Programme, WFP, warns that at least 25 million people are struggling with soaring rates of hunger and malnutrition as the crisis in Sudan sends shockwaves around the region. Thousands of families are being displaced and forced across borders into Chad and South Sudan each week. WFP's Regional Director for Eastern Africa says the impact of this conflict spans 3 countries, and that's Sudan, South Sudan and Chad, and this has created the world's largest displacement crisis. And almost a year into the war, it appears there are no signs that the number of families fleeing across borders will reduce. A WFP nutritionist adds that the malnutrition rates are also high.
But when we get screening data from the rates of malnutrition are high. We are finding that the most impacted are the women and children, and that's why a range of services are available at the border immediately when they cross in, but also when they're moved to the transit center.
People are leaving Sudan, fleeing Sudan because of the war, because of the conflict, and they're ending up here where WFP and other agencies are providing basic support. But it's an extraordinarily challenging circumstances. It's 40 degrees here today. People, as you see, arrive with very little, if anything at all. They're being registered, they're being given basic support, and then they're being asked to move further into South Sudan.
The head of the United Nations Assistance Mission in Somalia, Catriona Long, is lauding the country for the progress made in recent months in the implementation and completion of its security roadmap presented at the Somalia Security Conference December last year. She also said Somalia is demonstrating that a country can emerge from prolonged conflict to one that delivers for its people and acts as a force for good in the region.
Through our collective support, Somalia is demonstrating that a country can emerge from prolonged conflict to one that delivers for its people and acts for a force for good in the region. The federal government of Somalia has made solid progress in recent months in the implementation of its priorities, including the completion of a critical security roadmap presented at the Somalia Security Conference on the 12th of December last year. Since my last briefing, Somalia has also gained admission to the East Africa Community, reached the completion point of the Heavily Indebted Poor Countries Initiative, secured the lifting of the arms embargo, and most recently secured the endorsement of the Africa Union Executive Council for a seat on the Security Council in 2025-26. These are very significant achievements.
We regret the recent political tensions between Somalia and Ethiopia following the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding between Ethiopia and Somaliland. We echo the calls of the African Union Peace and Security Council and other key international partners, urging all partners to respect Somalia's sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity.
While Somali government affirms its keenness to exercise the highest level of self-restraint, it reserves its full inherent right of self-defense to respond to threats stemming from violations on its territorial integrity and unity in accordance with the provisions of international law.
A prominent figure in Tunisia's opposition and the leader of the Ennahda party, Rached Ghannouchi, has embarked on a hunger strike in solidarity with fellow anti-government activists. Well, the move comes as a form of protest against the continued detention of opposition figures, as reported by a team of lawyers representing the opposition. The 82-year-old has long been a vocal critic of President Kais Saied and his administration. Well, last year, he was arrested on charges of incitement against police and alleged involvement in plots against state security. In a statement released by his legal team, Mr. Ghannouchi urged Tunisians to uphold democratic principles, emphasizing the importance of freedom and judicial independence. Well, despite his hunger strike, the team says he remains committed to advocating for democratic Tunisia that is inclusive of all its citizens. 4 senior Egyptian security officials have been tried in absentia in a Rome court accused of kidnapping, torturing and killing an Italian doctoral student in Cairo in 2016. Tuesday's opening hearing marked the second time that the 4 Egyptian security officers have been tried on charges related to his death. Giulio Regeni's parents, Paolo and Julio Regeni, were present at Tuesday's opening of the trial and were outside the court with a Truth for Giulio Regeni banner. The boy's body was found on a highway days after he disappeared in the Egyptian capital on January 25th, 2016. He was in Cairo to study the union activities of street vendors as part of his doctoral thesis. Human rights activists say the marks on his body resembled those resulting from widespread torture at the Egyptian Security Agency. However, Egyptian authorities said the Cambridge student was the victim of simple thieves. We're in South Africa now. The Deep Sloot community is criticizing law enforcement officials for failing to keep promises they say they had made to combat crime in the community. Last month, 7 young black men were killed and burnt to death. Following this, residents marched to the union buildings, urging President Cyril Ramaphosa to take action against the widespread violent crime. Our South Africa correspondent, Innocent Samosa, reports.
This is Deep Sloot, north of Johannesburg. Crime is unfortunately a daily occurrence. In a stark critique of law enforcement's effort to combat crime, the Deep Sloot community has voiced their disappointment, citing a failure to fulfill promises.
I think they must put more police, especially RTT. Police, they must come and stay in Deep Sloot so that they must be visible. They must be visible on the communities. I'm so disappointed just because if they do the job, I won't be here right now talking with you.
The illegal immigrants are a problem in this area, but I think if the police can work hand in hand with a community, we can resolve this problem that we are facing at Deep Sloot.
According to a representative from the Deep Sloot Community Policing Forum, Mautla Muela says police are incapacitated to address community safety concerns.
Yeah, I think Deep Sloot is an overpopulated area, that the manpower in Deep Sloot police station, there are very few. So we need more manpower. If you can see, if there is a outcry, then they deploy some of the police from other areas, then the crime automatically goes down. But after those deployments, when they left, high rate of crime is just escalating like a wildfire.
In response to these concerns, police had this to say.
The Gauteng Provincial Joint Operations and Intelligence Structure, which is commonly known as the Prof Joints, resolved to heighten crime prevention by increasing police visibility through blue light patrols, static deployments of rapid response vehicles at identified strategic routes. So we believe that the visibility, it will discourage criminals from committing crime, but at the same time, it will bring some comfort to the ordinary citizens of this country, knowing that we are in the street and ready to respond in case of emergency.
As tensions escalate and trust in law enforcement dwindles, residents of Diepsloot are left questioning the effectiveness of current crime-fighting efforts and calling for urgent action to address this situation. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Samosa, Channels Television News.
South Africa's official unemployment rate has risen to 32.1%, marking a 0.2 percentage point increase from the previous quarter. The results of the quarterly labor force survey, QLFS, indicate that the number of employed persons decreased by 22,000 to 16.7 million in the fourth quarter of 2023 compared to the third quarter. Statistician General Risenga Maluleke released these findings in Pretoria, where the survey covering individuals aged 15 to 64 sheds light on the country's labor market dynamics.
Over the past, the unemployment rate has increased by 0.2 percentage points and indeed going up to 32.1% as of the fourth quarter of 2023. And indeed, we are saying that both the absorption rate and the labor force participation rate have decreased. And of course, we are saying that the labor force participation rate is sitting at 60% and the absorption rate at 40.8%. The number of those that are unemployed increased by 46,000, moving us from 7.8 million to 7.9 million as of the fourth quarter of 2023, whereas those that were employed decreased by 22,000, and of course returning us again to 16.7 million. The largest industries that recorded losses were in community and social services, 171,000, construction, 36,000, agriculture, 35,000. Whereas the largest increases, although they could not offset the losses generally, were in finance, 128,000, transport, 57,000, mining, 37,000.
And that's where we end Network Africa for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde.